Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling the develop phase of bringing a product into the world.
That's right.
We've got our source materials here, and what really jumps out about this stage is that this is when the abstract ideas start becoming tangible.
Yeah, it's a huge shift.
Think of it as going from blueprints to actually laying the foundation.
Exactly. We're past the initial planning and blue sky thinking. The develop phase is where the actual building begins, and that's a significant commitment of resource.
A big investment.
It's when the concepts truly start to take physical or, digital shape.
Now, we know you, our listeners, come from all sorts of backgrounds. Some of you might be deeply involved in making things, others just fascinated by the process.
Right.
Our goal today is to extract the really valuable insights about this develop phase from our sources without getting lost in overly technical details.
Keep it focused.
We'll be looking at 4 key areas: product development, market validation, launch planning, and program review.
And by the time we're done, you'll have a clear picture of the essential activities, the potential hurdles, and the critical elements to consider as an idea transitions into a real product ready for the world.
Okay, let's dive in with product development activities. Our sources point to an interesting shift in who's taking the lead compared to the earlier plan phase.
What's fascinating here is the change in primary roles. During the plan phase, product management often drives the definition of what the product will do and why it makes business sense.
Setting the direction.
But when we move into develop, the development team takes center stage. They're the ones actually constructing the product.
Right. And the product manager typically moves into more of an oversight role, monitoring progress and stepping in to solve problems as they arise.
Sort of guiding and unblocking.
Of course, that can look a bit different with agile approaches, which we'll touch on later.
Yeah, Agile changes the dynamic somewhat.
Now, a core part of product development is product implementation. What does that practically involve?
Product implementation is where the development team really gets into the details, translating the requirements into an actual working buildable product.
Okay.
This could involve internal development teams, or they might collaborate with external vendors or partners to deliver specific components or even the entire product.
So it's not always done in-house.
No, definitely not. Think of it like a construction crew following architectural plans, but sometimes you bring in specialist subcontractors.
And I imagine there's quite a bit of documentation that comes out of this stage.
Absolutely. The development team often creates detailed design documents. The level of detail can vary quite a bit, though.
How so?
Well, it depends on the nature of the product, any industry regulations, and the company's standard development procedures.
Right.
Building a medical device, for instance, will require far more rigorous documentation than, say, developing a new feature for an existing mobile app. Much higher stakes.
That makes sense. Our sources also mention some really interesting intermediate outputs, mock-ups, and prototypes. These sound essential for seeing the product take shape early on.
They are indeed valuable. Mock-ups are like non-functional models.
So just visuals.
Pretty much. Imagine them as early visual representations to help make decisions about the product's look, feel, and basic layout.
Okay.
For a new gadget, it might be a feasible model to see how it fits in your hand. For software, it could be static screen designs showing the user interface flow.
Like wireframes or screen flows.
Exactly. And what's particularly useful is that these can be used for early feedback from potential users, allowing for course correction before significant investment.
So getting reactions and making adjustments before committing to the actual build. Smart.
Very smart. Saves a lot of pain later.
And then we have prototypes. How do those differ from mock-ups?
Prototypes are early working versions of the product.
Yeah.
Maybe not fully featured, but they function.
Okay, so they actually do something.
Right. Their main purpose is to test how different components integrate and function together. These are often developed iteratively, meaning you might have several versions, each becoming more refined.
Getting better each time.
This is especially true for hardware. Interestingly, these prototypes can sometimes even be used for initial beta testing with a small group of real users to see how the core functionality holds up.
Okay, so mock-ups are more about the initial vision and getting early reactions, while prototypes are about testing the underlying mechanics and how everything works together. Got it.
You've got it.
Now, as the develop phase nears its end, there's a critical handoff to manufacturing or operations. That sounds like a potentially tricky transition.
It is a crucial point where different parts of the organization need to be aligned. It can definitely be tricky.
What does that look like for a physical product?
For physical product, this might involve purchasing components with long lead times. You need to get those orders in early. Plus, designing and setting up the manufacturing equipment and even designing the packaging for both retail and shipping. Think about all the steps involved in actually producing and preparing a physical item for sale.
A lot of logistics there.
Tons.
And for software or online services, what does that handoff look like?
For hosted software, it involves procuring the necessary infrastructure servers, software licenses, and configuring the hosting environment, getting the digital factory ready, so to speak.
Okay.
If we're talking about physical spaces like a new store layout, this is when architects and interior designers with specialized skills become heavily involved. It's about getting all the physical or digital infrastructure in place.
So a lot of interconnected activities. What's the product manager's focus during this transition period?
Their primary focus remains on ensuring that the product being built actually delivers the prioritized features and aligns with the overall project plan.
Keeping an eye on the requirements.
Exactly. They typically stay informed through regular team meetings, often led by the project or program manager. They're essentially making sure the train stays on the tracks in terms of what's being built.
But things don't always go according to plan, do they?
Yeah.
Our sources mention potential snags during implementation.
That's a really important point. Yeah, things go wrong. Unforeseen design challenges can emerge.
Like hitting unexpected technical hurdles.
Precisely. Or initial estimates for schedules or costs might turn out to be too optimistic.
Happens all the time.
Key team members or partners could move on, or even just a collection of seemingly minor issues can accumulate and have a significant impact on the overall progress. Death by 1,000 cuts sometimes.
And when these roadblocks appear, what's the product manager's role in navigating them?
Ideally, the product manager actively participates in finding solutions. They don't just identify the problem, they help solve it. They might need to help brainstorm alternative approaches that consider the trade-offs between functionality, cost, and timeline. What can we live without? Can we do this differently?
Making tough choices.
Right. The goal is to find the best way forward that still supports the original business objectives. However, if these deviations are significant, they would usually trigger a more formal program review involving higher-level stakeholders.
Escalating it.
Exactly. A key insight here is that seemingly small, unaddressed issues can have a compounding effect, highlighting the importance of proactive risk management and clear communication channels.
Okay, so that covers the actual building of the product. But our sources also discuss product requirements refinement. I thought those were pretty well defined after the plan phase.
That's a common assumption, but the reality is often more dynamic. Things change.
So the plan isn't set in stone.
Not always. The product requirements document, the PRD from the plan phase, can vary quite a bit in its level of detail and how rigidly it's followed. Some projects, especially in highly regulated industries, might have very detailed requirements locked down early with a very formal process for any changes. Think of it like a meticulously detailed architectural blueprint, where even small changes require sign-off.
The plan of record, as our source calls it.
Exactly. But in other situations, the initial requirements might be more of a good enough starting point intended to evolve as the development progresses, with a less stringent change control process.
More flexible.
Right. It's more like a general sketch that gets refined as the builder uncovers unforeseen challenges or opportunities.
So even with an initial PRD, there's still room for discussion and clarification during development.
Absolutely. Developers might encounter missing information, requirements that are open to different interpretations, conflicting requirements that need to be prioritized.
Like, do you want A or B? You can't have both with this approach.
Precisely. Or they might discover technical limitations that necessitate a change in the planned approach. The product manager is typically the one who steps in to clarify these ambiguities and make decisions, following whatever the established change management process is for the project.
And this is where agile methodologies come into play, right?
Yeah.
Our source mentions how they handle evolving requirements.
Yes, agile methods are specifically designed to embrace change. It's kind of their whole point.
How do they do that?
Instead of a large upfront requirements document, you have user stories, short, user-centric descriptions of a desired feature, along with clear acceptance criteria that define when the story is considered complete.
Makes sense.
These are organized and prioritized in a product backlog. Agile implementations can vary, impacting the product manager's role, but the core idea is flexibility.
And how does the product manager, or product owner, as they're often called in Agile, fit into this continuous refinement?
In Agile, the product owner works very closely with the development team during short development cycles called sprints.
They're embedded almost.
Pretty much. They continuously clarify user stories, answer the developers' questions, and make decisions on the fly as the team works on implementing each story. They are essentially the voice of the customer and are readily available to the development team throughout the sprint.
Constant communication.
Think of them as being embedded with the development team to provide ongoing guidance.
That sounds like a very collaborative and iterative process. Our source also mentions the potential for feature creep. That sounds like a common challenge in many projects.
Oh, it is indeed. Feature creep is when new or expanded requirements gradually get added to the project scope after the initial agreement.
Scope creep, yeah.
Exactly. This can happen due to new customer requests, competitive pressures, or even discoveries made during user testing. It's like deciding to add extra rooms to a house after construction has already begun.
And how does a product manager handle that? Just say no.
It's rarely that simple. Usually more negotiation is involved. The product manager needs to carefully evaluate the impact of the new request.
What are the options?
They might need to reprioritize existing features to accommodate the new one, maybe push something else out.
Trade-offs again.
Always trade-offs. Or defer the new feature to a later release, or if the impact is significant on the schedule or resources, they might need to initiate a formal program review to potentially adjust the project's scope and timeline. Get formal approval for the change.
Okay, we've talked about building the product and refining the requirements. Now let's dive into product verification activities. This sounds like making sure everything actually works the way it's supposed to.
That's a good way to put it.
The distinction between verification, building the product right, and validation, building the right product, is key here. Verification ensures the implemented product meets the defined requirements.
Precisely. Verification is about confirming that the product that's being built meets the agreed-upon specifications and requirements. Did we build what we said we'd build?
And who handles that?
This is typically the responsibility of a separate test or quality assurance team, QA. The test strategy that was outlined in the plan phase is now developed into a detailed test plan during develop, including specific test cases that can be traced back to the original requirements.
So it's systematic.
Very. It's a systematic process to ensure the product is built correctly.
So it's a methodical way of checking that all the boxes are ticked.
Exactly. The product needs to pass certain minimum levels of testing, which can include testing individual components, the integrated system as a whole, and everything in between.
Sounds like it could take a while.
For complex products, this testing phase can be quite extensive and time-consuming, definitely.
Our sources give some specific examples of verification processes.
Yeah.
Could you walk us through a couple, like for hardware?
Sure. For a manufactured product, a critical verification step might be a manufacturing test build.
What's that?
This involves producing a small batch of units through the entire manufacturing and quality control process. It's essentially a trial run.
Okay.
It helps identify any issues with the manufacturing documentation, the assembly process itself, or the quality of the components before you commit to full-scale production.
That makes perfect sense, catching potential problems early before a massive investment in production.
Exactly. Much cheaper to fix things at this stage.
What about software?
For hosted software, the operations team will often verify that the system can be successfully built and deployed in a staging environment.
A test environment.
Right, one that closely mirrors the live production environment. This is particularly important for ensuring smooth upgrades and data migrations with minimal disruption to users.
Avoiding downtime.
Yeah, and data loss.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, there might be separate compliance testing required for things like security vulnerabilities or adherence to industry-specific regulations, PCI compliance, CI compliance, things like that.
And the product manager, where do they fit into all this testing and verification?
The product manager often acts as a proxy for the end user during testing.
Sort of like the first user.
Kind of, ensuring that the overall functionality and user experience align with the initial vision and requirements. They'll likely be involved in reviewing and prioritizing any bugs or quality issues that are discovered. Is this bug critical, or can it wait?
Makes sense.
In some cases, they might even be responsible for formally accepting the product on behalf of the business alongside the test team.
Signing off on it.
Right. And if there's user acceptance testing or UAT with actual customers, the product manager is typically heavily involved in planning and overseeing that process.
So successful verification and compliance testing essentially give the green light for the product to move towards release and operation.
Precisely. Once the product has passed these rigorous checks, it's officially ready to be handed over to the teams that will manage its ongoing operation and support.
Now, the last aspect of product development we need to cover is release and configuration management. That sounds quite technical.
It is, a bit. But think of it as how you control and keep track of all the different pieces of the product as it's being built and prepared for launch.
Keeping everything organized.
Essentially, yes. It's about managing the development process and all the associated documentation in a controlled and organized manner. The level of formality required often depends on the complexity of the product and the industry.
Okay.
For software products, this is frequently handled through release management.
What kinds of activities does release management typically involve?
Think about maintaining version control for the software code and requirements, knowing exactly what's in each version.
Critical for tracking changes.
Absolutely. Also, managing the various development, testing, and production environments, orchestrating the actual software build process, packaging, and validating the final software components.
Like making the installer or the deployable package.
Right. Ensuring all necessary security and operational checks are completed, and systematically tracking any defects or issues that arise throughout the process. Often there's a dedicated release manager who oversees all these moving parts.
The specialized role.
Often, yes, especially in larger organizations.
And for physical products or more intricate systems.
That's where configuration management becomes crucial. It's similar to release management in that it involves version control, but it also encompasses managing the bill of materials, BOM.
The list of all parts.
Exactly. Tracking different stock-keeping units, SKUs, and maintaining all the documentation related to the product's design, manufacturing, and usage. This is often managed by a dedicated quality assurance group.
So QA might handle this instead of a release manager.
Often, yeah, for hardware and complex systems.
And the product manager's role in all of this structured management, how hands-on are they?
Generally, their direct day-to-day involvement in these overall release and configuration management activities is usually minimal.
Okay, so they're aware, but not doing the work.
Pretty much. While they might participate in specific tasks or provide necessary information, the ongoing management typically falls to the release manager or the QA team.
All right, we've covered the core of building and verifying the product. Now let's pivot to market validation activities. This is about getting that crucial feedback from the real world.
Exactly. Market validation is all about gathering insights from potential users and the market itself. Did we build the right thing?
Right, the validation piece.
Our sources highlight two primary areas here: developing a beta plan, or market plan, and conducting usability testing.
Let's start with the beta plan. We've touched on beta testing earlier, but what specifically goes into creating a comprehensive plan for it?
The beta plan is essentially a detailed strategy for how you're going to test your product with real users in a real-world setting before a full public launch.
Planning the test drive.
You got it. It's about ensuring everyone in the organization understands the goals of the testing and the practicalities of how it will be carried out.
Waysen.
Some internet companies even opt for a public beta release as a way to manage expectations and gather broad feedback. You see that a lot with games and software.
Our source emphasizes that beta tests can be a significant undertaking.
They certainly can be. Depending on the scope, from a small, select group of users to thousands of participants, it can demand substantial effort and resources.
Needs budget and people.
Definitely. These need to be carefully planned and integrated into the overall launch schedule. It's also crucial to recruit the right testers, individuals who genuinely represent your target market.
Your personas.
Exactly. And who are often early adopters or enthusiastic about the product category. You want motivated testers.
What are the primary objectives or goals of conducting a beta test in the first place? Is it just finding bugs?
Oh, it's much more than just finding bugs, though that's part of it. There are several key reasons.
Like what?
First and foremost, it's about verifying the product's functionality across a range of users and environments. Does it work outside the lab?
Real-world conditions.
Right. Second, it's for marketing validation, gathering feedback on your messaging, positioning, pricing strategy, and even potentially generating early customer testimonials.
Getting those quotes for the launch.
Can be very valuable. It also helps you assess the readiness of your supporting systems, like onboarding processes and customer support channels. Can we actually support this thing?
Testing the whole experience.
Exactly. And of course, usability validation is the product intuitive, efficient, and maybe even enjoyable for real users to interact with.
Do people like using it?
Yeah. Finally, it can even assist sales efforts by providing opportunities for pre-launch demos or trials. Ultimately, the most crucial aspect is validating core assumptions about user behavior or market demand in a real-world setting.
So it's not just about finding technical bugs, it's about validating the entire product market fit.
Precisely. The data and insights gleaned from the beta test are critical for making the final go-no-go decision for launch, determining if further rework is needed, or even, in some cases, whether the product should be canceled.
A major decision point.
Huge.
Our source provides a pretty extensive checklist of questions that a typical beta plan should address. It seems like a lot of detail to consider.
It is a thorough planning process. You really need to think it through.
What sort of things?
It includes defining the specific goals of the test, identifying the target audience and the number of testers required, outlining the recruitment and incentive strategies.
How do we get people to do this?
Right. Detailing what will be provided to testers and what's expected in return, specifying what aspects of the product will be tested, establishing the test management process and communication plan.
How do we talk to them? How do they report issues?
Exactly. Defining the feedback mechanisms, outlining the activities, schedule, logistics, resources, and associated costs, addressing any legal considerations like NDAs.
Got to cover the legal basis.
Always. Detailing how feedback will be incorporated, and defining the measurable success criteria for the test itself. How do we know if the beta was successful?
Wow, that's comprehensive.
It needs to be for a smooth beta program.
And alpha testing that's mentioned as well. How does that relate to the beta plan?
Alpha testing typically precedes beta testing. It's usually internal validation.
Using employees.
Right, employees or maybe a small group of trusted external testers, friendlies, who are often more forgiving of early-stage issues. The logistical details for any planned alpha testing should also be incorporated into the overall beta plan timeline.
So it's part of the same overall plan.
Often, yes. And it's vital to remember to factor in any identified incremental costs associated with the beta process into your updated business plan. It costs money.
Okay, so the beta plan is about getting broader market feedback. Now, what about usability testing? That sounds more specifically focused on the user experience.
Usability testing is indeed specifically focused on evaluating how easy and intuitive the product is to use. Can people actually figure it out?
Right.
As we discussed in the plan phase, usability evaluation should be an ongoing activity throughout the development lifecycle.
Not just a one-off thing.
Definitely not. However, during the develop phase, as you have more refined prototypes or even early versions of the actual product, you can get more targeted and realistic feedback from representative users performing more specific tasks.
And this is a particularly valuable time for usability testing because design changes are still relatively feasible and cost-effective to implement.
Right. Exactly. The further along in the development process you are, the more complex and expensive it becomes to make significant design alterations. Change gets harder and costlier over time.
So do it early, do it often.
That's the mantra. Therefore, conducting usability testing early and often as different parts of the product are being implemented is highly recommended.
What's the preferred method for conducting usability testing at this stage?
The most insightful approach is to test actual customers individually using a working version of the system or a realistic representation of it.
One-on-one.
Yeah. The key is to observe them as they attempt to complete specific tasks on their own without providing any assistance or leading questions.
Don't help them.
Right, because that can skew the results. Let them struggle a bit, see where they get stuck.
That's where you learn the most.
Absolutely. And as our source wisely points out, it's often far more beneficial to conduct multiple small, iterative evaluations with design revisions in between, for example, 3 studies with 5 participants each, rather than one large study with 15 participants.
Why is that better?
Because it allows for quicker learning and course correction. Test, fix, test again. You catch more issues that way.
So it's about continuous refinement based on observing real user interactions. That makes a lot of sense.
It really works.
Now we're moving into launch planning activities. We've hopefully got a product that's working well and has some positive market feedback. What comes next?
Launch planning is about taking the preliminary launch ideas from the plan phase and developing them into a detailed, actionable plan. How are we actually going to get this thing out there?
Okay.
It also involves creating all the necessary product documentation, as well as the marketing and sales materials needed to introduce the product to the market, all the supporting stuff.
Let's start with the launch plan, detailed. What distinguishes this from the initial launch strategy developed in the plan phase?
The initial launch strategy outlined in the plan phase was more about the overall approach and high-level objectives, along with initial estimates for tasks and costs. Sort of the big picture.
It's high level.
Right. The detailed launch plan developed during the develop phase becomes much more tactical and specific. It focuses on the precise messaging and positioning of the product.
Nailing down the story.
Exactly. And outlines the specific marketing projects and activities that will be executed leading up to and immediately following the launch, the actual to-do list.
What kind of essential components would you typically find within this detailed plan?
You typically see elements like the overarching launch strategy and specific measurable objectives, including sales forecasts.
What does success look like?
Right. The detailed messaging and positioning statements, the pricing and any planned discounting strategies, specific sales promotion plans, all the marketing collateral that needs to be created, brochures, website copy, etc.
Stuff people see.
Yeah. The development of sales tools and demos, the advertising and demand generation activities, including digital marketing strategies, public relations plans, the strategy for engaging with industry analysts.
Getting the word out.
Yep. Plans for any relevant trade shows or events, and importantly, the integration of the beta plan findings. How did the beta test inform this?
Connecting the dots.
And the detailed launch plan will also include updated project milestones and a refined budget. How much will this all cost and when will it happen?
Who is typically responsible for putting all of this together and driving the launch?
It can vary depending on the organization. The product manager might be the primary owner and driver.
They own the whole thing?
Sometimes. Or they might work very closely with a dedicated product marketing manager who then takes the lead on the go-to-market execution.
A partnership.
Often, yeah. Ideally, having a single individual with clear accountability for the success and measurement of the launch is most effective. One throat to choke, as they say, though maybe less aggressively.
We also have other supporting functional plans. Detailed. What do these entail?
These are the more granular versions of the preliminary plans that various functional teams like manufacturing, IT, support began to develop during the plan phase.
Getting into the weeds for each department.
Exactly. These plans need to be further elaborated with specific project activities, detailed timelines with milestones, assigned resources, and accurate cost projections to support not only the initial product launch, but also the ongoing operation and support of the product in the market.
Can you give us a few examples of these crucial functional plans?
Certainly. You might have a detailed manufacturing plan outlining the complete production process, including quality control, an IT operations plan detailing the infrastructure and processes for hosting and maintaining the product, if it's software.
Keeping the lights on.
Right. An ordering and billing plan outlining any necessary changes to those systems. A comprehensive support plan detailing customer service and technical support procedures, as well as training for support staff.
How will we help customers?
A distribution and logistics plan covering warehousing and delivery for physical goods. And, if applicable, a partner plan outlining how relationships with external partners will be managed.
So it's a fully coordinated effort across all relevant parts of the company to ensure a successful launch and ongoing support.
It has to be. Everyone needs to be ready.
Now, the last piece of launch planning we need to discuss is documentation and materials. That sounds like a significant undertaking in itself.
It is indeed a substantial effort. This is where you create the essential information that both your customers and your internal teams will rely on.
What kind of docs?
This includes comprehensive product documentation, which can range from installation guides and user manuals to troubleshooting guides and support FAQs.
Right.
You can take various forms, printed, digital, video, and be targeted at different audiences.
User guides, help files.
All that stuff. Importantly, having draft documentation available for beta testers is crucial so they can test that too.
Good point.
And then there are all the marketing and sales enablement materials.
Right. Got to sell it.
Exactly. Marketing collateral, such as brochures, website content, and social media assets, is typically spearheaded by the marketing team, but the product manager plays a vital role in ensuring the accuracy and effectiveness of the messaging. Checking the facts.
Keeping marketing honest.
Well, accurate anyway. Sales materials like presentations, competitive analysis documents, product demos, and ROI calculators are often driven by the product manager or created in close collaboration with product marketing and sales operations.
Tools for the sales team.
Yep. Sales training to equip the sales team with the knowledge and tools they need is a key culminating activity, making sure they know how to sell it effectively.
And what about the support team? They'll need materials and training as well, I would imagine.
Absolutely. The product manager will work with support training leads to identify the necessary training content and support materials, but the actual creation and delivery of this training are usually handled by the support organization. Train the trainers, maybe?
Our source also touches on pricing and legal discussions as part of this launch preparation.
Yes. Pricing strategy and execution are often key responsibilities of the product manager. This involves market analysis, developing the business case for the chosen pricing, and ultimately publishing the price lists.
Setting the price tag.
Right. While discussions likely begin much earlier in the conceive phase, finalization typically happens closer to launch. And legal discussions, very important.
Like terms and conditions.
Exactly. Product terms and conditions, licensing agreements, service level agreements, SLAs, and sales contract terms are also a critical part of ensuring a smooth and legally sound launch. Gotta get the lawyers involved.
Okay. We've covered building, validating, and planning for the launch. The final activity group in the develop phase is program review activities. What's the purpose of these ongoing reviews?
Program review activities serve as essential ongoing checkpoints to ensure that the project is progressing as expected and that the initial plans and assumptions remain valid. Basically checking in regularly.
Status checks.
Right. Given that the develop phase can often be lengthy and involve significant investment, these periodic reviews are absolutely critical for staying on track.
What's the main intent behind these review checkpoints?
The primary goal is to assess whether the project milestones are being met and if the project remains within acceptable boundaries in terms of schedule and budget. Are we on time? On budget?
Big questions.
Yeah. If significant deviations occur, these reviews provide a crucial opportunity to identify the issues early, make necessary adjustments, and prevent larger problems down the line. Course correction.
Catching problems before they get too big.
Exactly. They also provide a forum for stakeholders and senior management to intervene if needed to help resolve roadblocks that the project team can't overcome independently, bringing in the big guns if necessary.
Our source highlights some of the potential issues that might surface during these reviews.
Yes, as we discussed earlier, challenges can arise during product implementation that impact the timeline, the scope of what's being built, or the overall costs.
Usual suspects.
Right. But issues can also emerge in any of the supporting functional plans, for instance. Manufacturing might encounter unexpected delays or increased costs.
Supply chain problems, maybe.
Could be. IT infrastructure might face unforeseen complexities, or the support organization might identify a need for more resources than initially planned. All of these can have a cascading effect on the entire project and the original business case.
Knock-on effects.
Exactly.
And who typically takes the lead in coordinating these important reviews?
The project or program manager is usually responsible for coordinating the program reviews, which involve bringing together all the relevant stakeholders to provide a comprehensive status update.
The conductor of the orchestra.
Good analogy. They are also responsible for proactively managing risks and working with the various teams to resolve any issues that are identified.
The final aspect of program review is the business plan update. Why would the business plan need to be revisited after it was initially created in the plan phase? Wasn't it approved already?
It was approved to start develop, yes. But the initial business plan provided the justification for moving forward into the develop phase based on assumptions and estimates. As the product design becomes more detailed and the cross-functional teams develop their specific plans, significant changes might occur that necessitate an update to the original business plan. Costs might change, timelines might slip.
Reality sets in.
Pretty much. Additionally, the external market, the competitive landscape, technological advancements, or broader economic conditions might have evolved since the initial plan was created, potentially impacting the product's viability or market opportunity.
So the world changes while you're building.
Always. So it's about ensuring that the original rationale for pursuing the product still holds true as more information becomes available.
Validating the why again.
Exactly. Areas that might need updating in the business plan include the marketing strategy, the detailed development plan, the supporting functional plans, the launch plan, the financial projections, and the overall risk assessment. It's about keeping the business case current and accurate as the product development progresses and new information emerges.
It's clear that the develop phase is far more than just the act of creation. It's a complex orchestration of development, validation, planning, and continuous review.
Absolutely. It's a critical phase where the initial vision starts to materialize, but it demands careful management, consistent communication across teams, and a willingness to adapt to the inevitable challenges that will arise along the way.
Well, that brings us to the end of our in-depth exploration of the develop phase. It's really eye-opening to see the sheer number of interconnected activities that are happening simultaneously to bring a product to life.
And it truly underscores the vital importance of striking a balance between the actual product creation, obtaining crucial market feedback, and meticulously preparing for a successful launch. It's a juggling act.
It's definitely a dynamic and demanding phase, and as our sources highlight, being adaptable and ready to navigate unexpected obstacles is absolutely essential.
Indeed, you have to be flexible.
So for you, our listener, as you reflect on this structured approach of the develop phase, with all its embedded checks and balances, think about this. Consider how these principles of iterative refinement and the continuous integration of feedback could be applied to your own projects or endeavors, even those far outside the realm of product development.
Interesting thought.
How might embracing a more structured approach, incorporating feedback loops and regular reviews, help you to achieve your desired outcomes with greater effectiveness? Something to mull over.